welcome to this episode of Authentic Achievements, where it's my very great privilege to be joined by the fabulous Deevo Tindall. Deevo, welcome.
Fabulous. I like that. Welcome. Thank you for having me, Kim. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so looking forward to this conversation, but I always get carried away at the start. And before I do, let me just share with those watching and listening today a little bit more about you before we get into that conversation. So Deevo is the entrepreneur who's reshaping the landscape of branding and marketing strategy. With over 15 years of corporate experience under his belt, Deevo ventured into entrepreneurship to redefine brand narratives with innovation and authenticity. As the founder of Fusion Creative, Deevo's curated a portfolio of successful brands, each distinguished by its authentic message and immersive experience. Beyond his strategic acumen, Deevo is a master storyteller and photographer, bridging the gap between imagination and execution. And he's also a skilled speaker, a podcast host, and a regular podcast guest. I mean, wow, that's quite a lot, isn't it? I love the whole master storyteller because I think that's one of the greatest gifts is storytelling, because it's how we teach and it's how we learn. And I often find the best storytellers have got the best stories. And so I'm super excited to have you on so you can share some of those with us today. Could you start by telling us a bit about your journey so far?
Well, the only problem is they gave you the wrong press kit to announce me. That's not even who I am. No.
Oh, somebody else.
Completely somebody else. I don't recognize that individual.
He sounds great. Do you know him?
Can I be like him? I've been watching the Michael Jordan show on Netflix. Have you seen it by chance?
No.
I'm not much into sports anymore, but I've always adored Michael Jordan. When in my age, he was the pedigree of greatness. Anyway, there was the whole piece was on how they came up with the marketing campaign for Be Like Mike. And you just said Be Like Deevo, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Who else is gonna say Be Like Deevo?
Well, we heard it here first, and then we can keep a track on it and see how much it spreads.
I like that. It's very authentic.
Well, I aim to please. It's one of those challenges when you've got a show that you've had the audacity to call Authentic Achievements to then not be authentic.
Totally.
Because you're like, well, it kind of does what it says on the tin.
I have to ask though, what's with the thumbprint in the upper left-hand corner of your branding? I need to know the story.
It is the fact that each one of us is as unique as our fingerprint.
I love it.
So it's for us to be authentic, we've got to be ourselves, and there's only one of us. I think it was Oscar Wilde that said, "Be yourself. Everyone else is taken."
I tell that to my daughter all the time. She's always trying to compare herself to other things, and I'm like, "What's wrong with the version you have? It's pretty damn good." She's like, "Oh, Dad, you're just my father. You're going to say that." I'm like, "No, it's pretty true. You've got some pretty cool things you've done so far in your short life."
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because they do compare, and they look outside. I've got a 7-year-old, and she'll do the same. It's like, well, I'm not as good as so and so. I'm not as good as you. Only have to be a better version of yourself today than yesterday. Totally. That's your goal, is to be a better version of you, not to be anybody else, not to try and because you can't be them. Why would you want to be them? Because you're you and you're epic as you are.
I first heard what you just said a few years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Just make yourself a little bit better each day, be a better version of yourself the next day. And it was the Abraham Hicks when I first.
Yeah, was it?
Yeah, are you familiar with that? I'm sure you are. I first discovered her just after my divorce, and I was like, "That's the coolest thing ever." That's the point of life. Just become a little bit better than you were yesterday. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And it's achievable. Yeah, that's the bit I loved. I spent years desperately trying to be perfect, and that didn't go well for me, Deevo. Because we can't be.
There's a big difference between becoming better and becoming perfect. So that's no such thing. I have this really cool journal exercise, and I don't even know where I got it from, but I do it every night. And there's 5 questions in it, and one of them is what could you have done better today? And then you sort of just journal about it. What happened today that you could have done better? So did you not show up? Were you a little lazy? Did you not go to the gym? Whatever it might be. And you just sort of write down 1 or 2 thoughts on what did I not do today that I could have done to make my life just a little bit better. And I do that every night before I go to bed. It's pretty cool. It's sort of like taking a recap of your day.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I do a little recap on mine's usually. So I've got a couple of questions. One of which is, who have you touched today? And by that I mean, who have you made an impact on? Who said thank you, or who said that that was really interesting? And then how did it make you feel? Because our emotional brain responds 24 times faster than our thinking brain. So really rooting in on how you made things feel helps you to tap back into that feeling quicker.
I love that. Yeah, you can't really say, who did you touch today anymore, can you?
No, I know. I need a better phrase. I mean, I started doing it 25 years ago and it was okay then. But,
I touched a lot of people today.
Yeah, now it's like a case of like, okay, who did you make an impact on? Who did you make a difference to? Like,
what would the woke version of that question be?
Oh, I know. I'll have to ask the audience. People would like to write in and tell us how we can say that in a socially acceptable way. That would be amazing. I would much appreciate.
Don't get me going down that rabbit hole.
It can be said, yeah. It can be that rabbit hole, can't it?
Oh my goodness!
Like, you can overthink on. Can this be taken the wrong way, or is this going to land in the way that I intended it to land? And Scott and I talk about this a lot, which is we are in control of our intention. We aren't always in control of our impact, but as long as we acknowledge our impact and apologize for it if it doesn't align with our intention, then people are usually pretty forgiving.
Wait, rewind that. Back that up. How are we not in control of our impact?
Because sometimes you might have not understood a nuance of somebody that says this works perfectly well in all of these situations, but somebody comes from a different cultural background where the word means something very different. So, for example, we've just in the UK, on its own, in different towns, we've got different slang words that make no sense to somebody else because they've grown up in a different city, and therefore you might be saying something and thinking it's really easy to understand and really clear, but it's not landed for them because, as an example, really strange example, Deevo, but I grew up in Nottingham, and in Nottingham, a cob is a bread roll. It's like something that you'd have as a sandwich. Whereas if you go to Leicester, which is just up the road from us, a cob means you're upset and you're frustrated. Well, I didn't know that. So when I started working in Leicester, I said, I'm off to the cob shop. Does anybody want anything? And everyone thought I was upset and going off to be Marty. And I was off to go and get a cheese and pickle sandwich. So there was an element of, my intention was to be kind and sharing. My impact was to cause confusion and make people think I was upset. So on that one, my intention wasn't wrong. I couldn't have known that was going to be my impact, but I can learn from that. And I can say, oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't understand. This is what it means where I'm from. So okay. What I meant to tell you was this. And now I know something I didn't know before. So therefore, I can acknowledge my impact, I can apologize for it, and I can make sure I don't do that next time. So you're constantly evolving. But I guess what I was trying to do with it, and do with Scarlett, is recognize that sometimes although our intention was right, it might not land the way we expected it to. And rather than beat ourselves up over that, all you can do is own it, apologize for it, and learn from it, I guess was my thinking.
Fair enough. Okay, I accept that.
Cool. So can you share with us a bit about your journey so far, and your journey into entrepreneurship in particular? I think would be fascinating.
Well, it goes back quite a few years. I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I just didn't know it was called an entrepreneur. I started my first lawn maintenance business around 8 years old. I was cutting neighbors' yards, and then that kind of expanded into more neighbors' yards. And before you know it, I was mowing in any given summer, somewhere between 20 to 40 lawns a summer. So it's just that I've always been an entrepreneur. In terms of your question, I joined the corporate world straight out of college just because I thought that was what you were supposed to do. And I didn't have any parents that mentored me or told me there's an alternative option. It was just sort of like, go to school, go to college, graduate, get a job, do the thing. Right. And so that's what I thought you were supposed to do. So I did that. And I have an amazing set of experiences from that in terms of my business acumen and being able to engage and sort of work, because I was an officer in the company when I left, and so I had kind of gone through the ropes, if you will, and so I learned a boatload of things. But throughout that entire journey, I just kept wondering, like, is this it? This is what I grew up to be. Like when I grew up, this is what I wanted to be, is just sitting in a cubicle for 8 hours a day, like in this prison cell. And I wasn't really passionate about the work I was doing. Well, again, there's a difference between what I learned and what I was passionate about. And I just sort of had to take a hard look at myself and was like, is this really what I want out of my life? So just to make a long story short, in 2006, I basically walked away from that, and I was still doing some consulting on the side because it was really good money for that company. But I just started I started a photography business, which is what I've always done, and sort of like my right brain, left brain. And so I have built a very successful photography studio. And then around 2000 and I will say 2017, I started making a shift because I have 2 daughters, and I wasn't really able to see a lot of their events because I was just shooting all the time, and I was shooting destination weddings, so I was traveling the world, and I just wasn't home. So I had to start making a shift. Plus, I didn't want to always be doing photography, and so just like in an exclusive capacity. So I started looking at different ways, and serendipitously, it just sort of kind of fell into my lap. I was started getting asked to do workshops and keynotes and education stuff, and I realized that one of my true callings was working in the branding and marketing space of small business. And so I started figuring out a way to do that, which is where I am today. I started a branding agency roughly 2018. Had a partner at the time. We're no longer in that capacity, so I have a new business, and yeah, here we are today. I own the brand storyteller.com. So the intro that you put in, that business is actually, it still is out there, but I'm really primarily just running the brand Storyteller, which is what I do now. So yeah, it's a small, high-level journey.
I love that, because I guess with photography in general, that's all about telling the story.
Yeah.
In what you're doing, whether that's of a wedding or of nature, or to your point of the brand. It's all about trying to bring it to life, isn't it? And that I can't remember whose quote it is, but a picture tells 1,000 words, and I think it's so
Ansel Adams.
true, isn't it?
Yeah, Ansel Adams.
Thank you. But I think it is. You look at a picture and you start to create a story. You start to tell yourself what you believe is going on as a result of what is in the image in front of you and how you perceive that image. And so it feels like it must be quite a natural move from just doing the photography to really pulling together what is that story and how do you get it out there consistently for people, because that can be a real challenge for businesses, can't it?
Yeah, well, I learned it the hard way through my own business. I realized early on in my photography business that I was trying to be all things to all people, and so I was taking on all sorts of engagements that, that weren't really in my wheelhouse. So, baby photography or pet photography or whatever it was. And I was like, I don't even like shooting dogs. I don't like shooting babies. I realized that my true power was working in a one-on-one capacity with people and being able to intuitively engage with them and draw their emotions out. And as you said, tell their story. And you can't really do that with a newborn, and you sure as hell can't do that with a dog. So it was through that process that I uncovered, and I had worked in marketing and branding in my corporate life. So I already sort of knew the structure of it. But when I worked in the corporate world, marketing branding is not even close to what it is today in terms of the amount of materials and the amount of options we have at our disposal to share our story, whether it's social media, websites, and all that stuff. So I realized really quickly that my problem wasn't that I didn't like to shoot dogs or babies. It was that I was attracting the wrong type of audience because I wasn't clear on my messaging and what I was selling or what I was sharing or what I was talking about. And so people were sort of like, okay, he's a photographer. Maybe he can do this, maybe he can do that. And so that's when I sort of really came into the idea of branding in of itself as a messaging vessel to be able to tell your story to the right audience so that you can really hone in on what you do best and what you really want to do, as opposed to just like being all things for all people. So yeah, long and short of that is branding it's not a logo, it's not a website, it's literally everything that your customer perceives about you and how you go about telling that story so that you can attract the right audience and then in turn help them tell their story. Yeah.
I love that, because it's so easy for it to be confusing at the start, isn't it? When you're just setting up your business. And I was talking to an old client of mine actually, and when they first started out, they were like, "Oh, I can work with anybody," and I was like, "No, you can't." Well, you probably can, I said, but you kind of you need to be a bit more specific. You need to be able to talk to who is it you really want to help, and how is it you really want to help them, so that you can attract them. Because if not, if you're one size fits all, then people will get confused, and the confused brain doesn't buy. It's like puts on the pending pile and goes, "Oh, they're a generalist." And actually, particularly these days, because to your point, we've got access to so much more stuff than we had before. People want specialists very often, not generalists, don't they? So that they can go, this person knows me, knows what I'm doing, and therefore they'll be a good fit. Do you find that comes across in the work you do?
Well, before I answer that question, it's also what you just said. It's that, but more importantly, if I may, it also lends itself to helping you figure out your North Star and the things that you're truly passionate about. And so, you don't get stuck in doing something that you don't really like doing, like me in the corporate world. I thought my job was to go do this in the corporate world, and that's just not the stuff that I'm passionate about. And so if you can figure out what your story is, and they talk about the cliche term now, why, which is overused, but what's your purpose, what's your North Star? If you can really figure that stuff out, then you can hone in on your messaging, but more importantly, you can hone in on like your values. Like, these are the things that I really want to do in my life. These are the things that I really want to do to solve problems for people, whatever. And so, yeah, so it's like a double-edged sword, a good double-edged sword. And then to your question, repeat the question again. I'm sorry.
So I was just saying, is that something that you find that kind of like resonates, almost that having to be able to pull it in so that you understand, so the customer can see that you get them, that you understand them, that actually you're the yin for their yang. It's like they can,
that's right,
they can kind of like self-select. Whereas if it's too general, they can't make that choice, can they? Because they've not got clarity.
Well, I mean, in today's world, there's so many people doing so many different things, and a lot of people doing the exact same thing you're doing. So our job is to, and perception is reality, right? So to your point, if your customer perceives something about you that you do or that you don't do, or that you're good at, or that you're not good at, that sort of drives their buying power, that their buying decision, their motivations, and how they work with you. So if you're trying to be all things to all people, and you're not specializing in something that you're really good at, you are more generic, but the buyer you're not speaking the buyer's language. It's sort of like that movie, Lost in Translation. Everything gets kind of lost in translation. And if you can learn to really hone in on what that message is, you start speaking your client's language. So when they hear that, most importantly, when they hear what problem you're solving, which is what you really need to be honing in on, why do I exist is important. What's my North Star? But most importantly, I'm here to serve, and what problems am I solving for my client? Then you're speaking their language and their jam, because people only care about what's in it for them, right? It's like, what am I getting out of this transaction? Why would I give you my money? Why would I give you my time, my energy, my resources? And what am I getting in exchange for it? And what we want, I mean, think about yourself as a buyer. If you go to a restaurant, if you go to Home Depot, if you go to anywhere, like, you're looking to solve a problem. That's why you spend money on something, whether it's entertainment, whether it's education, whether it's inspiration, whether it's whatever it is, you're always looking to solve a problem. So if you can speak to the problem you solve, which is really honing in on a very specialized niche of what you do, your ideal buyer is going to hear that and be like, ding, 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 ding. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. I love that. I remember many years ago when I was also in corporate life, and I was at the time I was the UK head of sales. So you can imagine how well this next piece went down with my boss. But I stood up in front of their town hall and said, the first thing you need to know is nobody actually wants our product. At which point he looked a bit horrified. And I said, what I mean by that is, we're an accounting software company. Unless you are an accountant, you didn't go into business to do accounts. You have to do accounts. It's a need, but you're never going to create a want for that person, because they don't want to do it. They just have to do it. So there's no point trying to be the next Apple and trying to get people excited over lock date. It's just not going to happen. It's like, you don't want the mortgage, you want the house. You don't want the loan, you want the car. Totally. I said, so you've got to kind of look at, you can only create a want in something people really, they want a solution to a problem, absolutely. But there's some things where you can't then do even more, can you? It's like, you've solved the problem. That's it. I've got accounts and it does what I need it to. And you're not going to get me passionate about accounting now, because actually I just want to get on with my business. So it's kind of also, would you say that's fair? There's an element of understanding whether that problem that the person's trying to solve is a necessity, in which case you can pretty much, you either do it or you don't do it, or it's a desire, in which case there's an element of the experience and the other bits that come with that need to be considered in your messaging.
Yeah. So once you're able to communicate your problem solving, and so all things being equal, you and I do the exact same thing. We're equally adept at what we do. We solve the same problems, et cetera, et cetera. Now it comes down to that translation piece for your customer, because they're buying an experience. So when I hear your story, and if I'm comparing buying from Kim, or if I'm comparing buying from Deevo, I hear both of your stories, and I'm talking about myself in the third person. I hear both of your stories. I hear the problems that you solve. They both are in alignment with me. Now I'm going to start going into like, what would my experience be with you? And so that comes down to that emotional factor that you represent. And not all people are my client. You have a better personality than me. You're more bubbly. You're more kind. You're laughable. Whatever it is that makes you better than me. And there's many qualities. I'm going to start leaning emotionally, subconsciously into those things that I might not even know why I'm leaning into them. Maybe I like your face better as you show up on social media. Maybe I like what you say on social media, but maybe you're more genuine to me, whatever it is. And every buyer has a different emotional trigger, right? So mine is different than yours. I go to a restaurant, not so much, even though I'm a foodie, I want to have a good experience. I would rather have lesser quality dining food experience as long as I knew that I was greeted well and I was treated well, and the customer really and the client really understood my needs and was very attentive, and et cetera, et cetera. Like this, everybody has different emotional triggers. So it comes down to that next, and then that's why we buy. What's the story? What's the emotional triggers? And how can I connect with this individual and really have a really cool experience around it? So it's our job as business owners to figure all those factors out.
I love that. And it is very much about that experience, isn't it? Because we're going to have an experience. The point is whether it's a good one or a bad one.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, most of us don't want a bad one. It's not like, hey, where do I go for a really rubbish experience that I can sign up to? It's like, actually, we want the best experience that we can.
I would have applauded you, by the way, going back to your corporate story when you stood up in front of everybody. I was one of those people in the corporate world, like everything is so, what's the word? Everything seems so scripted. This is one of the reasons I hate LinkedIn, and I shouldn't say this, but you go to LinkedIn and everyone just says like the same story. I'm really happy to report my 50-year anniversary today. It's like, okay, what's the point? Like, tell me something that can solve a problem. And I always felt corporate world was like that. It was just like everything was this scripted, bureaucratic, follow the line, toe the rope type of thing. And so anytime anyone like you would have spoken out, which was what I did all the time, I would have been like, yes, go Kim, go Kim. So anyway, well done. I'm just giving you a high five on that.
I must admit, my boss did get used to me. It's like you say you were really good at your job. He said, but you were always mildly disruptive in a positive way. So, but you always had people, laughing and joking. And I was like, how has she got them laughing? This is really serious. And I was like, because being a leader doesn't mean to say you've got to have a personality bypass. We can take it seriously and still have some fun. The two are not mutually exclusive. You can have a little bit of fun even in a tough situation.
And yeah, you're right. And people take themselves so seriously, especially in that environment. It's like, dude, you're just a number. If you walk away today, you'll be replaced, and somebody else will be in cubicle 945-5 by tomorrow. So it's like, just get over yourself, man. It's really, what you do is not that big of a deal, and it can be easily replicated. So I actually had I had been on the job. I was in an executive development program when I first started out of college. And so when I graduated that after 2 years, they sent me back to San Diego, where I worked in the corporate environment. And I had only been there, I don't know. And I was a different person, just to my discredit. I was a bit haughty and egotistical in those days because I thought I was the shit. I just graduated from this program, and I was working in this environment where it's just a bunch of old people, and they didn't really have a lot of like energy and anyway. But I got a talking to from one of my high level bosses, because he said the same thing. He's like, I had gone outside protocol. I didn't even know what protocol was. Like I was assigned to a project, and I thought my job was to do the most efficient, most effective way possible, under budget, under timeline, whatever. And I was like, and so we drove our project to do that. And I remember it was like, I don't know, I want to say maybe a month or so into the job. Apparently I was rubbing people the wrong way because I was too efficient. And I remember him sitting me down, and he was like, I appreciate and applaud what you're doing, your enthusiasm, but it's just not how we do things around here. And you're really starting to piss off a lot of people because you're basically too efficient. And he's like, we can't go under budget. We can't go under timeline. The project was slated to do this. And there's I guess there's a whole bunch of reasons why. I don't really understand it because I'm not an economics major, but I just remember thinking, is this really what it's going to be like? Because this is not how I operate. Because I'm always like, what is the path of least resistance in the most effective solution possible? And that's the direction I'm going to go. I'm never going to look at it like, okay, here's the most optimal way, but that's going to be under budget and under timeline. So I'm going to screw that and go over here. Let's do the really fucked up long way over here. So I just like, dude, really? So.
Oh, you've got to love it. So some of the processes and systems that are in place in in corporate life can be the most hilarious. You're like, wow, I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't comprehend why we're doing it that way. I remember doing one big project once, and the guy, I did follow to an extent the process, but he was like, everybody's already working on your stuff. He said, like, you do put the email into me like you're supposed to, so it goes on the spreadsheet. He said, but when I ring them to tell them they need to work on your stuff, he said, they're already working on it. And I was like, yeah, no. I said, but that's because they sit over there. I can see them. I said, so I know I have to email you. I said, but I just walk over there and say, just so you know, I know you're really busy. I'm just letting you know I am going to put in a work request for this. But whenever you can get to it. I said, because of that, they always do my stuff because I'm nice to them and I take them sweets. And I have the common courtesy to walk across the office where I can see them and let them know that I'm about to add work to their work stack, rather than sit here behind my computer and hope they don't notice it was me, really, with my name on it. So it's just a bizarre. And it was God. Nobody talks to people. And I was like,
Kim, you and I have so many parallels. I also got in trouble because I would walk around and talk to people. And I got in trouble early in my career because I wasn't supposed to leave my cubicle. Apparently, I was like out of my cubicle for too long or something. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not over here water cooling just talking about the fucking baseball game. I'm like working with this individual because I'm a human and they're a human. And I sort of want to like grease the wheels, if you will. I want to know what's going on. Like you've charged me with the project. Let me do the project the way it should be done, like human to human. And this was before the days of social media. I'm going to clean my camera off. I can only imagine if that company still existed, which they don't, in today's world where we're all locked into like a computer and a social media box, like there would be zero communication. Like that would be the early days of full AI. Like nobody's allowed to interact with each other. Just stay in your cubicle for 8 hours. I just remember thinking, there's no way in hell I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. So I've got to find a way out. So yeah.
It is scary, and it would be. And it's funny, when we first went into lockdown, I co-authored a book on remote working. And I said, for me, one of the most important things is the benefit of the virtual water cooler. Because in a normal office, you have those water cooler moments, don't you, in the lift or somewhere else, where you talk about something that isn't work. Actually connect with, to your point, the human being in front of you, instead of going, oh, well, I can only ask you these questions. And then I'll go back to my cubicle and I'll sit in my box. And I think we sometimes we lose the art of the fact that people like to talk, and that doesn't mean they're going to work less hard. It doesn't mean they're going to be less productive, because actually they get a high from having had that conversation and go back and work a bit faster, because they've been given some space, haven't they? Some opportunity to remember that they're human and not just a cubicle dweller. This is not allowed to move outside of that. And I think sometimes with the environment within which we operate has such an impact on us, and yet we don't always put intention into that. We don't intentionally think about what's the impact of how we're asking people to work and how we're asking them to operate and interact, or not. In your case, like, do not leave the cubicle, stay where you are. We'll see you at 5 o'clock. Thank you. Is going to be good for that, for the organization as a whole, as well as for the individual, because you can't thrive in that environment, can you?
No, I guess some people can. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. So anybody who's listening to this that works in that environment, if that's what floats your boat, go do it. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying, me personally and my personality, working in that environment I would have never lasted. And I realized that really early on. And so I just had to figure out a way to get out of it. And that's not to say that this is a good conversation piece, because the entrepreneurial world that we operate in is not for everybody. And it's a tough world. And if you don't have resilience and fortitude and all the things that, people talk about all the time, you're not going to be able to survive in this world. And so it's almost like the two polarities are necessary for a specific type of person. Again, like, go with your power, whatever it is that makes you be able to function. And if working a 9 to 5 and the freedom and autonomy that gives you, or flexible, whatever that gives you, then that's your thing, go do it. But it just wasn't for me. So yeah. And I figured that out really early on.
I love that. That is so true. It is about finding what's our thing, isn't it? And not everybody else's. And then you're not looking at, okay, what does my goal look like? Because if I look at your goal, it looks very different. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. That's their goal. Sure.
Absolutely.
Yours has got to go with how it makes you feel, and whether or not I think if this is going to be what I do every day for the rest of my life, is it going to bring me joy? Or is it going to depress the living daylights out of me? And that'll be very different, as you so eloquently put. It'll be very different for different people, because some people, will find things that you don't find very interesting, really interesting. So if they were given that to do every day, that they would love it. Whereas if you were given it, you wouldn't. And likewise, they probably don't like some of the things you like. So finding out where you get your energy from, where you find it fun instead of just a chore, it can be an invaluable step, can't it, in working out where you need to be.
Yeah, 100%. I'm working with somebody right now who she thinks she wants to leave her current corporate space, but she's not sure that she actually wants to be a boss. She would rather. She's like, I sort of rather like working for somebody, and I don't have to worry about all the other things. So so she's torn, and so then it really just comes down to, are you being introspective enough to understand what it is you actually want out of this experience on this planet? So if working for another individual is the only direction you want to go, then, but you're also simultaneously feeling completely drafted in the experience that you're having, well, maybe there's another experience where you can have that opportunity to work for somebody else, but have greater freedom or flexibility or autonomy or recreation or whatever it is you need. So again, it's not a matter of just saying, okay, I'm a corporate guy, so I know I'm a corporate guy, I'm going to stay here. Maybe there's a different type of environment that would be more suitable to you. So I don't think a lot of people take the time to be introspective about that and sort of like, what's the best bang for my buck in this, for my life experience here. They just sort of like get caught up into it. I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day, and he's like, I wouldn't even know what else I would do, because my expenses are so great now that, and I have a nice house, and I've got multiple cars, and now my kid's off into college, and my wife likes to buy expensive things. He's like, I never wanted to stay in the corporate world, but I make so much money now, I'm just sort of stuck on this treadmill. He's like, I wouldn't even know where to begin. And so, if you're not careful, that's what's going to happen. You're going to get stuck on a treadmill, and then you're going to look back and be like, I always wanted to do all these things. And you hear it all the time from people, what do people say on their deathbed? Oh, I wish I had done this, and this. And it's not cliche. Like it's truly a matter of fact. So I guess the long and short of that is if you're not happy, find the things, take some time to just get away in the woods for a week and just journal on what would make me happy. If I were to stay in this space, how could I shift it to make me more happy? And then see if you can find a way to do that. I don't know.
I love that. I think it is that going inward, isn't it? It's that being able to go inward and actually be curious, I think. One of the things I've worked really hard on in the last few years is to be more curious of myself and others. So instead of, our brains do leap to decisions, and it's like, I'm interested. Why do I think that? Why do you think the other? Why do we go there? But doing the same internally, because very often how we've been brought up and how we've been shaped as human beings will immediately put layers of judgment in against what our insides are telling us. I can't say that, because I can't say I want to have fun. That's awful. That says I'm not going to do any of these things. So we almost censor ourselves, and it's actually, to your point, it's that journaling piece and bring it out and just be curious about it. Just like don't label it. Don't decide if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but just sit with it for a while, which is easy to say and hard to do the first time, isn't it? Until you kind of build that muscle of saying, whatever comes out, I'm just gonna look at it. Go, interesting. That's what I think. Is it?
Yeah. Well, there's one thing to censor yourself, and there's another thing to have like verbal diarrhea or Tourette's, where you just sort of like, I've had to learn the hard way to sort of take a deep breath on certain things, because I'm very opinionated and I don't have a filter. And now I'm part of a blended family. So I have 3 new children that I never had before. They're my microwave popcorn kids. So in completely different parenting styles and whatnot. And so, typically I would just have to say this because that's how I feel. And I've realized that, they're not going to receive the information the same way my kids did. So I have to censor myself to some extent with not having verbal diarrhea around it. So it's sort of like, you do have to be diplomatic to some extent. I'm not saying you should curb what you have to say, but there's different ways. And I'm actually working with my coach right now on like, how do you say the same thing in a different way so that other people can receive it from their language, not yours?
Yeah. That's such a valuable skill to have, because I think, there used to be the old adage, treat people how you'd like to be treated. And it's like, well, only until you get to know them and then treat them how they want to be treated.
Yeah.
Because they might want to be treated in a different way to you. But ask, shame the devil, ask them, how do you like to be communicated to? How do you like to receive your information? How do you, I remember doing a dreadful role play exercise that used to drive me mad when I was in corporate life. But as part of this one, we've got a group of actors that were teaching us feedback. And I had to come up as part of the role play and kind of give the feedback. And I'm sitting down looking at him and saying, can I just ask you, how do you like to receive your feedback? And he looked like aghast for a moment. He goes, in 20 years, nobody's ever asked me that question. And I went, well, I think that's really sad. It's your feedback. Yes, I might be giving it to you, but it's yours. So surely I need to know how you like it so that it lands well. If not, it's an invaluable exercise, because actually you're not going to listen and I'm just going to waste my time speaking. But I think sometimes we don't ask those questions, do we? We don't open ourselves up to saying, tell me how you like to be communicated with. Tell me how you like to learn things. Tell me how you like to have these parts delivered, so that I stand a better chance of tailoring how I'm going to say it so that it actually has a positive impact.
So if you're charged with giving me feedback and you ask me that question and I say, I don't actually want any of your feedback, what would you do?
Oh, great question. I'd be curious about that. Okay, that's really interesting. I'd love to understand more about why you don't like receiving feedback.
You need to go into therapy. You need a long sofa in the back of you, not that little not that chair, so we can just lie back and be like,
down.
Let me tell you, Kim, how I really feel.
Yeah, let's just, because normally there's something and I guess that's, for me, that's the other thing that goes wrong with feedback, is people always, when you're giving people feedback, and we assume it's going to be negative, feedback can be positive. You still need to know how they want to receive it for it to land. But equally, whenever you talk to somebody and they're in that feedback conversation, you're having two very different conversations, because you are talking about the impact that they've had. They are talking about the intention that they had. So you're having two very different conversations, because they'll start to defend what they were trying to do, and you're busy telling them what they actually did. And you're like, that's like a waltz and a jive trying to become a dance. It's just wrong. It's just uncomfortable for everybody. And so one of the things that I learned is, if you start by working with them on tell me what your intention is, tell me what you're trying to achieve. I think, from what I've seen, you're trying to be a great team player, you're trying to do what's right for the customer, whatever it is that's true and honest. And we go, yeah, I am. Like, great. Would you mind if I shared with you some observations where you get in your own way? Because we've now agreed that actually you're a great person, you're trying to do a great thing. So now the feedback is no longer something to be afraid of, because all it is now is helping you get out of your own way, because the goal's correct. Whereas if you do it the other way, people can feel like they're under attack, and that you think the dialogue goes through their head. They think I'm a bad person. They think I'm trying to do the wrong thing. They think I'm rubbish at my job. They think, none of which is true. So I think sometimes it's in how we set up the conversation and how we do it intentionally that helps it to land better. Would you say that that's something that you've seen in brand work as well? Because it is very much about being intentional, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's everything, really. It's again, the messaging is everything. What perception is reality. So if your client receives the messaging that you're putting out, and your messaging is everything, we talked about that earlier. So it's how you answer the phone, it's how quickly do you respond to emails, how do you respond to emails, what does your social media say, what does your website say? I had a guy on the road the other day, I've told the story before. I had a guy down that I was sort of 3 or 4 cars back, and he was getting in some sort of road rage incident with some couple of cars, and he was driving very aggressively and weaving in and out. It wasn't even a freeway. It was like just a side road, and he was cutting people off. And then he'd put his hand out the window and flip them off. And then they pulled up to a light, and they were like jabbering back and forth at each other. And I was like, by the time I pulled up to the light, I had gotten So I was diagonal to him, and I'd gotten a couple cars back, and I'm seeing him back and forth on this. And of course, me being who I am, the first thing I noticed was not the argument. The dude has his car wrapped in his entire business, and his entire car is wrapped. And I'm just thinking, that's the dumbest motherfucker. If your car is wrapped with your business, the last thing you should be doing is getting on the road, arguing and cutting people off and screaming. I'm like, because everyone sees who you are, your business, your brand. Like, here's your website, here's your phone number. I was like, bro, like, let me just pull up next to you and say, let me offer you some advice. But I was like, wait, he's probably going to flip me off. So I didn't say that. So yeah. So my perception of this guy is like, I think he was a plumber or was a landscape guy. But I would never call that guy in a million years, just because the perception of what I saw him doing. And he may have had, and again, there's another thing, his mom could have cancer and is dying right now, and he just left the hospital. So like, it's a really like big rabbit hole. But for me as a customer, we don't care about that his mom has cancer. We only sort of see what's my perception in that reality right now. And my perception was, what an asshole. Like, I would never work with that guy. So to your question, it's really important that whatever you're saying, you're speaking in the jargon, the language, the experience, the story that you want people to connect with, so that when they hear that story, their reality is, that is the individual that I would love to exchange this energy resource with.
I love that. It is so true, isn't it? Because we're leaving a perception in every moment. It's whether or not we're owning what that perception is and trying to leave the best one that we possibly can. Deevo, you've shared so very much, and I'm conscious of your time, and I could chat to you all day, so I could just keep going. But if you could go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Be like water. Yeah, really, truly. And I learned that lesson from a really cool, The Tao Te Ching is the book. It's Lao Tzu. He wrote, it's like 2,000 years before the Bible came out. And he just has all of these amazing life experience lessons, philosophical approaches to thing. And I think for me, I can only control how I respond. I can't control how other people behave. Right. And so early on in my life and in my career, I take things because I'm very passionate about what I do, whether it's sports or parenting or even just, my job. I take everything very, very seriously. I pour my heart and soul into it. And I also take things very personal if they don't go the way that I had expectations around them going. And, nothing really ever goes to your expectations, to be honest with you. Life is not a linear line. It's a squiggly, fucked up, turn back, go straight, stop, jump, climb, roll line. And so if I could offer one piece of advice to anybody, it's sort of like, learn to understand that you only have control over how you respond to things, and the rest of it is out of your control. Like, there's nothing you can do about it. I cannot control that this guy was cursing at everyone on the road and potentially causing car accidents, but I can control how, if I feel like I'm going to get engaged with him and get angry, then I should probably pull over the side of the road and take some breaths. Just sort of like, I can control that piece, right? So yeah, you always can control how you respond, would be my long and short of it.
I love that. I often say, we don't get to control how people behave towards us, but we do get to control our response, and it's our response that says everything about us. To your point, his response wasn't a great one, and look at the impact that's had. So I love that. Such great advice. So Deevo, how can people get in touch with you, and who do you help?
So the answer to your first question is thebrandstoryteller.com. So www.thebrandstoryteller. You can find me on Instagram at Deevo, the brand storyteller. I help small businesses and entrepreneurs. Anybody who is looking to launch a personal brand, anyone who's looking to scale a new product, or one of the individuals I'm working with right now he worked in the corporate world most of his life. He's just ready for something bigger and better. He has a fantastic resume of achievements. He's really good in front of an audience. He's really good at doing lectures and workshops and things of that nature. And so we're helping him morph into a personal brand so that he can show up on a more impactful level for him, because he doesn't want to live the rest of his life sitting in an office or a cubicle like we were just talking about. So my primary audience, I work with a lot of business coaches, but anybody who's an entrepreneur who is very purposeful, who is very organized in the space of what they think they want to do and really go into making a difference in one way, shape, or another. And so I help them build that brand out. So again, small businesses, entrepreneurs, anyone who needs help telling their story so they can connect with the right audience.
Amazing. Thank you so very much. And I will ensure that all the ways to get in touch with you are in the show notes below. Deevo, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for coming on, joining the conversation and sharing such insight. It's been a pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And to everybody watching, until next time, take care.